All right, everyone. Welcome to the Tonto's Demise Week 15 recap. Can you tell me where it hurts, Matt? I think we all know the answer to that. A little comfortably numb shout out to the Yinzer Jags this week after the results of this past week. Two just fantastic matchups. Perhaps one of the best weeks of playoff football that the league has ever seen. Not to get to seem hyperbolic or get carried away here, but two excellent matchups. Ones that could have gone either way, really close. One was very close, and one was a huge scoring matchup, a slugfest, back and forth. Definitely the highest scoring matchup in Tonto's Demise playoff history. Not the single highest score in playoff history, but no, only once before in Tonto's history have we had a playoff matchup where both teams went over 200. Talked about it a little bit on the lineup. Because I didn't count, it's happened a couple times. If you count fifth place games, third place games, those are always, they're listed here on the Yahoo playoff schedule there. But really, those don't count. I don't think they happened, but nobody remembers those. You're not in the playoffs technically anymore. You were still fighting for maybe third place, getting some cash. But other than that, once you're knocked out of the playoffs, you're out. We don't. Those matchups really probably don't count as much, and they're definitely forgotten by most everybody. But so there was a match in 2012, and I went back and looked. There were a few others, one or two, maybe fifth place games, third place games, where both teams scored 200, or somebody scored pretty high, definitely over 200 there. But the only playoff matchup previously where both teams were still active and going for the Tonto Bowl, where they both scored over 200, was that matchup 2 years ago when Detling scored 206 to the Isotopes 203. And then this year we have once again the Isotopes in a 200 versus 200 matchup. Please forgive me, I have a little cut on my nose here. I don't know where or how it came from, so if you're watching this and wondering what's going on, I don't know either. I don't know where it came from. Just know I must have been scratching or did something there. But anyway, now that I mentioned it, you're gonna stare at it probably and didn't even notice that it was there before. So, all right, we got two matchups to talk about this week. The semifinals. We now know who will be playing in Tonto Bowl 18. We kept Gags back here because he's one of them, and the other one is this guy. So, making my way back to the Tonto Bowl. But we always talk about the defending champion first, and unfortunately, the defending champion is still alive and active in a matchup this past week, so we got to talk about him first. Gags to Riches, going up after knocking out Hillbillies on PCP last week, getting the second half of the Podcasters of Power, coming off a bye, the number 2 seed, Yinzer Jags, Gags to Riches, and Gags to Riches comes out with the victory. Final score, 180.9 to 178.25. And it's already been well documented that this matchup, after going into Monday night, Gags to Riches held a .05 lead. His score was 178.3 to 178.25 for Yinzer Jags. That is one passing yard, .05. Fortunately for Gags, he picked up and played Jalen Samuels for Pittsburgh because James Conner was out, and he got you 2.5 points. So any stat correction will be irrelevant, because you got a couple point lead. It's very, very unlikely, and that almost never happens, that a stat correction changes things more than a point, especially for somewhat a non-quarterback, maybe a yard or two here. So defenses and quarterbacks are where you can get more of like a point something change. But I mean, that's assuming that if Gags, because I guess he thought about starting nobody, and it's like, well, I've got the lead, nothing can change that, but it was only .05. A risk I would definitely not take, and he ended up not doing it, hoping that Samuels would get some points, which he did. So extremely unlikely that somebody's going to end up with negative points. A non-kicker is going to end up with negative points. That I mean, it makes sense if you're up a couple points to not play somebody there, just in case. But when it was only .05, if it was 2 points or so, then I would have definitely considered benching Samuels, because you probably weren't going to get any kind of stat correction. And that's assuming that a stat correction of all the players in the NFL, it would have had to been one of these 10 people in Gags' starting lineup. What are the chances of that? So, but Yinzer Jags couldn't quite get there. And as we all well know, we saw his video walking out into the woods, not quite making it to the woods, but out into the snow. And it was really, really funny. Anyway, let's get into the actual matchup and see what happened here. From Gags to Riches, he went with Mitch Trubisky over Deshaun Watson. Rolled the dice. I thought it was a stupid thing to do, but I bit my tongue, didn't say anything, because Deshaun Watson just played Indianapolis 2 weeks ago and put 50 points up on them, and so if I was him, I wouldn't be too worried about that. I don't know where all the Trubisky hype came from. I mean, Minnesota, okay matchup, but Deshaun Watson went for over 60 points, and Trubisky got you 29.5, which very likely could have cost you this matchup. You're very fortunate that it did not. Anyway, Tyreek Hill, 17.5, Mike Evans, 17, and Emmanuel Sanders, got to plug him in there because no Julio, let's see, and no Michael Thomas, so he was a good play there for you this week. He got you 11.5 points. Big one here for you was David Montgomery, another 32-point week, almost 150 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Jalen Samuels, again, 2.5 points. And then Kelsey, 22.8. Cole Beasley in the flex gets you 19.2. Your kicker, Tucker, goes for about 8.5. And then the Arizona Cardinals defense, let's see, Yahoo says 17. Must have been 20 because we only bumped you up a couple of points there so it must have been 20, and Tucker's actual score must have been 8.6, I'm going to guess there. So 20 points from your defense. But anytime in a playoff matchup, you only get 30, you get under 30 from your quarterback, things are not looking too good. Fortunately for Gags, the rest of his team picked up the slack. Close to 20 for a lot of people, and I said over 30 there for Montgomery. Now, let's see. We had, was that a Thursday game or a Saturday game? I can't remember. But I think it was a Saturday game. Josh Allen for Yinzer Jags started off this matchup going for 72.25. 2 rushing touchdowns. I think he had some passing touchdowns too. So yeah, you could not have asked for a better start, a more confident start for Yinzer Jags in this matchup. Getting over 70 points from your quarterback. I'm sure, however long it was between then and Sunday afternoon, you were riding high, thinking you got this, no problem. And unfortunately, it all came crashing down on you at the end here. Yinzer Jags, then we have Davante Adams. Let's see, those were the 2 Saturday games, right? Buffalo was early, and then Green Bay was later in the evening there. Okay, that's right, on Saturday. So, so you also had the Davante Adams go on Saturday. You kind of knew where you were at with him. But he only got you 11.2. Thielen gets you 9.1. Amari Cooper only gets you 2.3. Eckler, just under 12. Mostert, perhaps a difference maker in this matchup. He gets injured halfway through the game. Not sure he played much in the second half. He gets you 6.8. No catches, all rushing yards there. So who knows what he could have done. Instead, here the matchup difference was only 2.65. So you needed 2.7, 2.5 points, 3 points from him. In an entire half of football, very possible that could have changed the outcome here. Tunyon, so another Green Bay player you had on Saturday night. So as good as Allen started off for you, things kind of leveled out with your Packers here. 10.8, only a couple catches, but one of them was a touchdown for Tunyon. Ty in the flex, only 4 for 71, 11.1 points. Blankenship gets you about 11.5, maybe 12. And then the Baltimore Ravens defense, they got you, Yahoo says 19. Looks like you're bumped up about 12, so 31, I'm going to say, was the score for the Baltimore Ravens defense. Both defenses in this matchup recorded safeties. It doesn't happen too often. But yeah, what is there to say about this matchup when it's that close? Other than anything could have gone differently, would have changed the outcome of this matchup. I think lineups were kind of in question. Some people made some decisions at the last minute. I think Gags said he put Trubisky in at the last second. Not sure about Detling there. How much he, so he had, for Gags, he had Sanders there to put in since no Julio. Made him a decent play. I guess your biggest issue was your quarterback question there. If you go with Watson, who's been your quarterback probably all year, except for when he was on bye, this matchup wouldn't even be as close. You would have been over 200 points, and there would have been much less drama on the result here. But you didn't. You went with Trubisky, and it almost cost you. Once again, you get kind of lucky, and it works out in your favor. As for Yinzer Jags, as I think we all know already, Sunday morning, it was announced that Zeke was not going to be playing, and Detling jumped in there, picked up Pollard around noon on Sunday for the 1 o'clock game there. And for some reason, and I think I'm sure Detling will make us very aware of the mindset going into this matchup. If there is a podcast this week, and he did not. He did not go with Pollard. Went with stuck with Ty. I guess would have been the player to take out in the flex there. Although that would have been a tough move. I might have considered sitting Cooper maybe and putting Hilton in the one wide receiver spot because Houston is a good matchup there. But the point is, you knew Zeke was going to be out. You picked up Pollard, but you did not plug him in. And he went for over 31 points this week. Would have swung this matchup easily in your favor. Really, so just said this wasn't the only matchup. We'll get into it a little bit later with the other one here where I think people were unsure, not 100% on their lineups until basically game time. So, but I mean, it happens. It's the playoffs. You want to be. There's no room for error. You want to make every possible correct lineup adjustment. Although the more, as we are, I think it's been well established that the more you try and tinker with your lineup, the more you try to tinker with what got you here in the first place. Now that the pressure is really on, the more you tinker, the worse you end up just messing things up. So, what is there to say about this? What else further can be said about this matchup? Two great teams going against each other, and it came down to some indecision on your starting players, and this one could not have come down much closer than it did. Unfortunately, someone has to lose, and that was Yinzer Jags this week, failing to make it to the Tonto Bowl, and Gags to Riches will make it to his second Tonto Bowl in a row, trying to win 2 in a row and be the first person to win our back-to-back championship pot, which has only, I believe this is year 4, so the pot is only, well, not only, but it's going to be about $240 an extra if Gags is able to win the Tonto Bowl this year. And then it'll start over. So would very much like to see that pot build up for quite a while, make some till it gets to be a nice amount of money that makes a big difference for somebody somewhere down the line here. So, yeah, not much else can be said. We'll get to maybe we did it last week. I guess maybe we'll sum up a little bit about the teams who are leaving us this week by being eliminated from playoff contention. And of course, this week it was Yinzer Jags. We applaud you for your effort. Tip of the cap. And regroup. Try to get that number 3 and $50 here. Win your money back for the season in that number 3 game next week. At least go out with your head held high. All right. And next up, we have the Springfield Isotopes going up against Possum Magic. Topes, the number 1 seed on a bye last week, would have scored about just under 200, I think, if I had adjusted the score there. Didn't really make a difference. I don't know why. I only mention that because Possum Magic was on a roll as well. Scored almost 200 points last week. This was the 3rd time this year that the Isotopes and Possum Magic have butted heads. And I really don't know what to say without sounding self-congratulating, arrogant. I don't want to say that. I'm just saying that cocky. That's not what I'm going for. But I'm just saying that what happens is what happened, and I don't know what there is to say to Possum Magic about this season because said, unfortunately, you played the Isotopes 3 times, and all 3 times the Isotopes went over 200 points and defeated you each time. And unfortunately, this one was the hardest one to swallow. Final score here this week, the Springfield Isotopes 230.45 to Possum Magic's 215.95. So 215.95, the highest now losing score in a playoff matchup in Tonto Bowl history, at least as far back as I went, about 2010. We've only counted all points for a couple of years now. For a long period there, 200-point scores in the playoffs were pretty rare. They've become a little bit more common over the past few years. But once you get to like 2010, 2011, the accuracy of the records becomes a little bit sketchy. As we know, Detling didn't really keep accurate scores there, and just made sure that the winners were correct. So it wasn't until Jimmy became commissioner and let me go in and edit all the stuff here on a weekly basis that we know for sure that these scores are correct. In the playoffs, said there was a couple of years there where I would do like a weekly update and had like in the message boards there, if you may recall, a little weekly thing where with what the actual standings were, because they weren't correct they were never correct on Yahoo there. So anyway, this matchup also came down to Monday night, as Possum Magic actually held about a 5.5-point lead. With the Isotopes left to play was Deontay Johnson. And if you watched the first half of that Steelers-Bengals game, had to be I was pretty nervous, pretty upset. Like, I can't believe I'm going to lose because the Steelers, I can't get 5 points from Deontay because the Steelers are playing like complete trash. Can't do Ben can't do anything right. But fortunately, they came out and played better in the second half. Almost immediately threw a touchdown pass to Deontay, putting the Topes over the top here, and he actually ended up with almost 20 points when he needed about 5.5. For the Isotopes, Aaron Rodgers, he went for just under 40 points. DeAndre Hopkins, 33. Deontay Johnson, 19.9. Calvin Ridley goes off also, 35.3. Hopkins and Ridley both went over 150 yards receiving to get that bonus there for that. 10 catches for Ridley, 9 for Hopkins, 8 for Johnson. Kamara goes for 18.5. Aaron Jones, 27.8, over 100 yards there and a touchdown from him. Gronk, only 6 points. Jeff Wilson, I will also admit that was a literally 12:59 swap for Nyheim Hines. Didn't make a difference in the final match score of the matchup here, but it ended up being the better play as Hines only went for 7.5, but Wilson went for 12. So it would have been 4.5 points less there for the Topes. Kicker, Bass from Buffalo, he went for about 10.5, 11, actually it was like 11.5. And then the Buffalo Bills defense, the score I'm pretty sure was 27. So a lot of good scores here. I said 230 points. What kind of ignored things, like I think I talked about it a little bit on the lineup there as well. In the playoffs here, when it starts, The past few years, when I'm in the playoffs, I've realized that it makes it a lot easier to just kind of shut off, tune out, and other than making sure my guys are playing and no surprise injuries, no surprise inactives or anything there, and everything is good with my lineup. Just don't look until it's pretty much over, and whatever happens, happens, instead of agonizing over every minute of every game for the entire weekend. So I went mostly Saturday. Saturday, yeah. I actually ended up, yeah, that was the Bills. I ignored the Bills, but I ended up watching on like during work, kind of. I'm gonna put it on my phone there. The Packers Carolina game, just because I had Rodgers and Jones, and I just couldn't help myself, and just wanted to see what happened. It ended up being not great, but at least not great for Rodgers, but at least Aaron Jones came through with a good score there. And also Diggs had a good game, had to go through and ended up catching that. Fortunately, he did not. He stayed just under 150 yards receiving. That would have been a 3-point bonus there for you. And then I also knew that Possum Magic, his entire roster, everybody else that he had was playing on Sunday at 1 o'clock, because he had a lot of people all in the same games here. So I knew that by 4 o'clock on Sunday, when I was getting to work, Treesice's point total would be pretty much known, and a lot of my guys would just be starting. Hopkins was just going, Kamara was going, Wilson was going. That was a 1 o'clock game too, there, the Cowboys. So, yeah, actually, I had Kamara, Hopkins, and Deontay left. And I knew where Possum Magic was around 4 o'clock. Estimated his total to be about 212, something like that. But I didn't see until he had mentioned it that Tannehill actually had a long touchdown. So that actually ended up getting you the 215 after kind of just winged it, figuring out the total there. And I thought that you were done at like 209, 210. And a couple minutes later, like that Dallas game, there's nothing else going on in that game. They're just going to run out the clock. And then I see it, boom, he gets another 6 points. I'm like, what the hell just happened? And Dallas, I guess San Francisco, tried for an onside kick. And instead of just grabbing it and going to the ground so they could run out the clock, CD Lamb grabs it and just takes off running and scores a touchdown, which counts for your defense, because it is defense special teams. That's a special teams touchdown. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. An extra 6 points on an onside kick return? Like, this matchup could end up coming down to that play. And it almost nearly did. But, so I knew that I had I estimated Possum Magic to be around 212, and I was around 158 or so. So that meant I needed about 40, 50, 55-ish from Kamara, Hopkins, and Deontay. So again, just needed about 20 from each of those guys. And very quickly, Hopkins lost a fumble. So he was in the negative territory, and Arizona jumped out to at one point it was like 16 or 17 to nothing. Might have been 16 because they got 2 touchdowns and the safety. So I want to say it was 16, but thank goodness Philadelphia made this a game and said that we were getting blown out real quick, but they came back and made it a game because at that point, when Hopkins lost his fumble, Kamara wasn't really doing too much. I think Breeze started out that game. They got into the second quarter, I think Breeze actually, and Breeze was like 0 for 6 with an interception. Like the entire first quarter, not one completion for him. And I said Hopkins was in like negative territory. And I was like, this is over. I'm done. I'm toast. Tree's going to freaking beat me. I'm not going to make the Tonto Bowl. And kind of just put my phone down and went to work. And things just kind of went as good as they possibly could have gone. For me, and unfortunately for Possum Magic, and said Hopkins ended up getting 33, Kamara 18, and got me nearly there just by themselves. So almost thought Kamara would have gotten a chance to actually put me ahead without Johnson there in the waning seconds of that Saints Chiefs game. I believe the Saints actually they went down the field and got a touchdown there near the end to make it a 3-point game. I know Kamara was on the field. It's like, just throw a pass to him, get him some yards, maybe get him a touchdown there at the end and give me the lead without needing Deontay having to worry about Monday night here. But anyway, I got the win. I will take it. And let's talk about Possum Magic here. He had Tannehill go for, again, with the long touchdown bonus, 63.75. His receivers, Tyler Lockett, 7.5. Scary Terry McLaurin, 14.7. Diggs, 25.7. Derrick Henry, 28.2. Definitely was a big concern there in this matchup. But he would have needed a 40-some pointer to get you the victory here this week. If he had done that, it might have taken away a little bit from Tannehill's score. But 40-something is definitely within Derrick Henry's ability. He's done it in the past couple weeks twice. Had a score like that. Chris Carson, 8.9. Ito Smith is the running back from Atlanta, I think. Just reading a little bit about him. Irv Smith is the tight end for Minnesota that you ended up playing. He got you 6.7. Marvin Jones in the flex, actually he goes for 10 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown, 27.2. So a good call there. Fairbairn gets you about 8 points. And then again, the Dallas Cowboys defense, Yahoo says 20. The actual score must have been about 28, 29, maybe? Something like that. Yeah, it must have been 29. So our defenses were pretty close there. But again, talked a little bit about lineups. Possum Magic had pretty much had his lineups been pretty consistent all year long. He was using Kansas City Chiefs defense for quite a while, but picked up Dallas because I guess you liked their playoff schedule here. Worked out for you last week, nearly worked out for you here again this week, which is kind of a surprise because the Dallas defense was really the laughing stock of the NFL early on this year, getting Dak Prescott into those huge holes that he had to climb out of and get 85, 70 to 80 fantasy points there per game early on this year. But so pretty much you got sick of Stafford, got rid of Stafford, plugged in Tannehill. He's actually been pretty good for you, kind of up and down. But in the last 3 weeks, he's had 2 games over 60. Actually, in week 13, when you played the Isotopes, he had over 60. He had over 60 again this week. Last time we played Derrick Henry only scored about 6 or 7 points. So kind of got lucky here. Played you in week 2. Derrick Henry only scored 8.5. And played you week 13. Derrick Henry only scored 6. But this week he was back to normal with 28.2. Luckily was able to hold on here and get the victory. So yeah, we went through, and I think according to Possum Magic Treesice there, he was on the fence back and forth until the last minute on which tight end to start. He had Logan Thomas in there most of the week, I think, but ended up picking up Irv Smith not too long before Sunday, before game time there. I think probably Alex Smith being out and Dwayne Haskins being the quarterback there had a lot to do with this decision. It was a tough call. You've had Irv Smith a couple times this year, plugged him in there. Something about him you must be attached to him for whatever reason that is. But you were back and forth on it, and unfortunately for you, you made the wrong call. And like you said, Irv Smith, his score was 6.7, and you could have played Logan Thomas, is the tight end from the Washington football team that you wanted to play. You had McLaurin already. I don't know if you wanted to double dip so much on the Washington offense, especially with Haskins in there. Tough call to make. But Thomas ended up going for 23.1, which is about a 16-point difference between those two, 16 and a half. And our difference was about 15 and a half. So if you had started Thomas instead of Smith, you actually would have won this matchup. Just barely. I think it would have been even closer than Gags and Yinzer Jags. And if I had scored 230 points in the playoffs and lost, which I assume it was this close to happening, I don't even know how you swallow a pill like that. I don't know. I would have been pretty upset if that is what had happened. It would have been an epic way to go out. But man, it would have been a brutal way to go out. Not saying that Possum Magic, this wasn't a brutal way to go out for him. It's never easy. We all want to get there. We all want to win. And when you get, especially once you get into the playoffs, you get a win, you think your team is rolling along. And by all means, your team was doing well, playing well, putting up good scores. 215.95, that's going to get you a win 95% of the time, if not more. And I don't know there's nothing I can say to console Possum Magic right now. He's licking his wounds and just it hurts, I'm sure, and it's just upset. Going to take a little bit of time to get over this loss. Probably thought he had it in the bag. Still trying to get that first Tonto Bowl victory. This year, not able to do it, just falling short. Thanks to the Topes having one of their best weeks of the entire season. But that is just how it goes. We clap out Possum Magic. Tip of the cap to you. And you will be playing next week against Yinzer Jags for the number 3, and to hopefully one of you will win your money back. Hopefully it'll be you. But yeah, with the victory, the Springfield Isotopes move on to the Tonto Bowl, and they will face From Gags to Riches here next week. So, we did a little bit last week. Talking about 2 matchups. I'm already up to 40 minutes here. So, real kind of quick, let's get into a summary of the teams we are saying goodbye to this week. For Yinzer Jags, finished the season 9-4. Started off in first place there. I think stayed in first for a week or two. Then slipped down a little bit. Retook first place for a week or so there. Near the end of the season, when the Isotopes went on a bit of a slide. But yeah, right up there in the top of the standings pretty much all season long. Didn't really make any big trades because your team is pretty much the same as it was, other than some pickups here. Not too different than it was at the beginning of the year. Let's take a look. Well, you had one trade, dropped a couple people, things like that, some moves here along the way. So started with your keepers were Mostert, Kittle, and Kyler Murray. Mostert missed a lot of the season with injuries. Same with Kittle. Perhaps your season could have gone differently if he was playing this week. Had a healthy season. You did all right. You did pretty well this season, all considering that you didn't have Kittle pretty much the entire time. Let's see. You had Kyler Murray was one of your keepers. You picked up Josh Allen, who said pretty late in the draft, and I think him and Diggs probably the biggest surprise of this season. Just how good Diggs has been. Josh Allen, we all knew he was pretty good, but I would say, and I already talked about this a little bit with Detling, that said Josh Allen wasn't picked until like the round like 15, 16, something like that, mid-teens there, because, well, at least I'm assuming, and I could be wrong about the exact number here, but I remember because I think I had Josh Allen as a bench quarterback last year, maybe if not, or the year before, so probably last year, because he hasn't been around long enough to be to have been more than like 2 or 3 years. But anyway, I remember having him and reading somewhere during the offseason that he had no NFL game where he went over, I think, 280 passing yards. Never over 300. Yeah, he was running a little bit, getting some rushing stats there, but said never. The passing game was never anything too big for them. I mean, which absolutely makes sense because it's Buffalo, and they play boring football. They run the ball. They got Singletary. They had Moss going into this year. Play good defense. Run the football. Throw it when you need to. Mix it up there. Really, thought Singletary and Moss were going to be a much bigger force this year than they ended up being, and ended up being Diggs, who took off, going to changing teams. Not very often that players really just take off like that, and I think he's actually one of the league leaders in catches and receiving yards there. He's probably the number one wide receiver. If not one, he's definitely top 5 in terms of overall fantasy points this year. Actually, I think Tyreek is number 1 because of his rushing. He has over 100 rushing yards over the course of the season there, just to get a little extra fantasy points there. But yeah, that was a big surprise there with what has gone on with Buffalo. But yeah, Matt didn't really he only made one trade there later on in the season, traded away Tyler Boyd to get Austin Eckler, and which totally made sense, I think, because I assume everyone is well aware now that, and I think he has said it, made it pretty clear that his draft strategy is draft all receivers, pick up whatever running backs you can along the way here. And said he had Devontae, Thielen, Cooper, Boyd, starting those guys, but he had Mostert as a keeper. And his other running back, he started out the season, his other running backs were James White, Tevin Coleman, another 49er, and A.J. Dillon. a rookie. I think, oh, you did have Latavius Murray. So really kind of just speculative plays, hoping for maybe some injuries there. Backup players, A.J. Dillon and Latavius Murray there. But those guys, and you're kind of, I guess you're just kind of hoping that one of them pans out and becomes a consistent week-to-week starter. Unfortunately, that didn't really happen for you this year. But I guess one of the benefits of having this draft strategy where you load up on wide receivers is, and ignore the running backs, is you've got all these good receivers, and especially in this situation here where you had two quarterbacks who were playing pretty well. Said instead of drafting a running back early on and having the potential for them to bust, like several of them have this year, drafting all these wide receivers, then waiting to see, 6, 7, 8 weeks into the season, see who's actually doing good, and then trade one of your good wide receivers for one of those running backs, and so you don't have to draft them; you just trade for them eventually. You also could have done that with one of your quarterbacks. It's kind of what I ended up doing this year with one of my quarterbacks, because there's always going to be one of the luxuries of having a surplus of talent at one position, especially quarterback. There's always going to be somebody who is, during the course of the season, at some point during the course of the season, somebody's going to have quarterback problems, quarterback issues, and is going to be looking to make an upgrade. So it's all. I'm kind of surprised that neither Murray or Allen went in a trade for you, but I believe you probably were trying to do. I'm just speculating here based on what I've heard and read that you are kind of doing 1-for-1 trades, quarterback for running back or quarterback for wide receiver or whatever it was that you were doing. But and I think they kept getting shot down. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate any further into what goes on with trade negotiations there, but you can pretty much see from the trade that I made with Jim what said. I think Matt said at some point that I should have just traded Mahomes for Hopkins straight up, but so that leaves me with that would have left me with only Aaron Rodgers. That's kind of a sticky spot. Obviously, Jim was going to start Mahomes every single week that he had him, as long as he had him, which ended up not being very long. But if I had taken Hopkins from him straight up, that would have left him with very little at wide receiver there, with what he would have had left, which is why I gave him Mecole Hardman. Sammy Watkins had got hurt right around that time too, so it kind of worked out with the timing on there that Hardman he always has good potential to put up a good score. And if something would happen to Tyreek, he would be in there, and you just never know. It's not a horrible combination to have. Said Mahomes and Hardman, just as even if Hardman ends up being just a bench speculative play in case something happens, and it's good to have those people on your bench instead of trying to fight for them off of the waiver wire and through the bidding process there, end up giving up a lot of your fab to try and get those players who were on your bench at one point in time there. But anyway, talking about that trade, so Eckler went down, so Justin Jackson was a right, just good, a lot of good timing for that one trade there. But we're talking about Detling right now. But again, made a couple, just really had that trade again where he picked up Eckler for one of his wide receivers there. Picked up T.Y. later on in the season. Picked up a bunch of wide receivers here. Pittman, Tim Patrick, Ebron, and ended up picking up Tunyon later on in the season. I believe early on he was a huge free agent acquisition for Saquon, I think so. Spent a lot of his fab to get Tunyon and ended up dropping him off. And I assume that Detling picked him up so that he would have Adams and Tunyon to play against the Isotopes if he met the Isotopes in the playoffs, because my quarterback is, of course, Aaron Rodgers here. So, said just some injury problems during the course of the year. Devontae Adams was out for a while early on after doing pretty well. But just, again, the thing about these, and you saw what happened this week, the thing about having all these good wide receivers, they're not going to put up 25 points every single week. You're going to have these weeks where it said they put up single-digit scores. Said like this week, Thielen went only 2 for 11. Cooper went only 2 for 10. Even Adams 7 for only 42 there. Running backs, now that we count all the points there, quite often a running back is going to get you. I mean, look at Eckler's, his receiving stats were 4 for 19. So he got you 6 points there. He got you just as many points. So he had more catches and more yards receiving than both Thielen and Cooper nearly put together. So sometimes it works out where those receivers are going to have good games. But it just doesn't. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that you need a little more balance on your roster, because if you're counting on wide receivers to get you 20, 30 points every single week, there's going to be weeks where that happens and you look great. But then there's going to be weeks like this where they put up pretty pedestrian scores, and it kind of comes back to bite you here. Said with your running back situation, even though, assuming Mostert could have gotten you enough points if he doesn't get injured, but that guy, I said it before, that guy's always injured. He looks great when he's healthy and playing. Like early on in this season, I think it was the first play of the whatever game it was, just took off for like a 90-yard touchdown, like a shot of lightning right down the field. Unbelievably fast. But the guy, such talented player, but just can't seem to stay healthy there. So maybe I've kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit with Detling's draft strategy. Whoever is listening, maybe this will get talked about a little bit more. Maybe we'll have to shuffle things up a bit. And said, it is. I kudos though for you, because it is an interesting strategy to draft all these wide receivers, and instead of drafting these wide receivers who you are kind of established, you know what you're going to get from them, instead of taking a running back, and who running backs have much greater history of busting than a lot of these wide receivers. And then said again, waiting till 6, 7, 8 weeks into the season, seeing who's doing good, and then just instead of drafting them, you're trading for them though. Fortunately, said other than Kittle being pretty much out most of the year, it worked out for you that you didn't have a lot of injury problems. Pretty consistent all year long here. Maybe things have been a little bit different had Kittle stayed healthy, and who knows what would happen for a lot of people if Dak Prescott had stayed healthy all season long. Amari Cooper was definitely a big factor here in your loss, but his stats have never really been the same after the loss of Dak there. So who knows what could have been different this season. Already talked about that in one of the previous reviews here, but so Detling didn't really make any big splashes with trades and stuff. Made some good acquisitions there along the way. Just kind of said going these heavily reliant on running or wide receivers here instead of running backs. And again, if you'd played another running back instead of a wide receiver, this matchup would have gone the other way for you. Said in a league where it's points are counting for everybody's catches and stuff like that now. It makes those running backs a little bit more valuable than they were in previous years here. So, yeah, that pretty much sums it up for Yinzer Jags. I mean, had a consistent season, was near the top of the standings all year long, so it ended up 9-4. One of the top scoring teams in the league. First round bye, number 2 seed going into the playoffs, but unfortunately just couldn't quite get it done here in week number 15. And I'm assuming that since you went out here in the first round of the playoffs, second round, your first matchup, that means you will be sporting the Romo jersey next year, seeing as how it is exclusively for, I mean, more often really it's whoever the winner. So talked about this with the seeding stuff earlier weeks here. Almost every year, either the number 1 or number 2 seed goes bye week and done. And that's unfortunately for Yinzer Jags, that's him this year. And so basically the point of the Romo jersey is for someone who kind of cruises through the regular season, does well, has a good year, but then can't get it done in the playoffs, crashes and burns. Much like the real Tony Romo, who could do really well all season long in the regular season, but pretty much every year would get to the playoffs and could not get over the hump there. Would crash and burn, I guess, is the best way to get it. So Detling, look forward to sporting that Romo jersey next season, assuming it shows up at the draft next year. All right, and then finally, we've got Possum Magic. Talk about his team a little bit. Same thing with him, though. Pretty much a consistent lineup most of the season. Lost Marlon Mack early on. Lost Preston Williams, one of his keepers. Not sure how great. He was doing okay. Lost him about during the middle of the season there. But he was kind of just a bench play in case something happened here because you ended up, after Derrick Henry, you loaded up on wide receivers and were doing pretty well. And said obviously Diggs, McLaurin was one of your keepers, a late round there. Marvin Jones was a keeper as well. You ended up using him quite a bit here. But said Stafford was your quarterback most of the year. I don't know if you drafted Tannehill or picked him up somewhere along the way. Let me take a look at your week 1, see if he is on your bench there. Yeah, Tannehill was on your bench in week 1, so you must have drafted him week 1. See, you had Blake Jarwin at tight end. He went down with an injury for the year. Marlon Mack went down early on with an injury here too. But yeah, your lineup isn't really too much different. But you got rid of Stafford, went with Tannehill. But I mean, looking at your week 1 lineup compared here to your week 16, week 15, your receivers: McLaurin, Marvin Jones, Tyler Lockett, Derrick Henry, Chris Carson, Diggs in the flex. Obviously, you moved Diggs up to one of the wide receiver spots, and we're shuffling your flexes around a little bit. Henry and Carson, running backs. Hayden Hurst, your original tight end. So Jarwin went down. You had Jared Cook there for a little bit. Ended up bouncing back and forth too with Irv Smith there during the season, and ended up adding Logan Thomas there. But yeah, you're starting. I mean, you had the Chiefs defense. End up original kicker Zane Gonzalez. He was on IR, so you ended up with somebody else there, Fairbairn. So yeah, your starting lineup didn't really change too much during the course of the year. Didn't really came out with a solid draft. Made some changes along the way there. In typical Possum Magic fashion, using up burning through most of the transactions long before the end of the season there. Kind of a little bit risky, but fortunately it didn't work too bad for you. Just believe what can be said. Just drafted well. Got your players. I said Tannehill ended up working out pretty well. Lockett just kind of really just he's been ice cold for a while now after starting off the season. Said he was popping off for 30, 40, 40, 45 points here and there. But he's been in the single digits quite a lot here over the second half of the season here, unfortunately. He had a 20-pointer in week 11, I see. But in week 7, he went off for 56 points. But ever since then, he's hovered around 10-ish, maybe. Lucky to get into double digits there, other than that 20 in week 11 there. So that was one of the biggest fears going into this week playing you, was that Lockett is definitely overdue for one of those random games where he just pops off for 45 points. I thought your receiver core is Derrick Henry doing Derrick Henry things. Again, Carson was a good pluck. He missed a little bit of time along the way here. But the rest of your team, Diggs, obviously, one of the best picks, ended up being one of the best picks in the draft because I think it was 5th round, and he ended up being, you took him right after I took Deontay. Ended up being, so he's one of the top wide receivers in the whole league this year. So for Possum Magic, so I don't think he really made any trades either. Let's take a quick look at that stuff. Trades. Possum Magic, where are you at here? Yeah, I don't think you made any trades this year, it would appear, which is unusual. I'm sure that you had people making offers to you. I think people were trying, from what I understand, people were trying to get Derrick Henry off of you here. But I don't really know why you would have given him up. You were fighting for a playoff spot there towards the end of the season. Considering that you were fighting for a playoff spot, I don't really know what anybody could have given you that would have made your team better, considering your wide receivers were stacked. Derrick Henry, you said you were doing okay with Marvin Jones or couple different people there in the flex there, Melvin Gordon maybe, and we're getting decent play unless somebody could have knocked your socks off with a quarterback here, like Mahomes or something that would have. So I'm sure people tried to make trades for you, especially for Derrick Henry down the stretch here, trying to get him because, as I think I mentioned to Detling, and I think most people were aware that Derrick Henry's playoff fantasy schedule was just ridiculously good, and I know the fantasy pundits were screaming it from the rooftops. Get Derrick, if you can get Derrick Henry, get him, because he could carry you through the playoffs here. So yeah, and that's I assume that's kind of what ended up happening for Possum there is that nobody could really make you. Your team was pretty solid. There was probably other than maybe if Disco or I said Mighty Midgets or Disco later on had offered you Mahomes for something, maybe that was one of the only things that could have wrestled Derrick Henry away from you. But again, there was really no trade that could make, very few trades that could have made your team overall better that people could have offered you to get Henry there. So I'm assuming that's kind of how things went down. But the starting lineup you put together through the draft worked for you pretty well most of the season long. Said you ended up 7-6. Actually, kind of went. Let's take a look at your schedule here real quick. Started off, said we're kind of middling there, but you needed to get. Said you had some. You started off 1-3, came back to to be 4-3, 4-4, 5-4. You were 5-5. You ended up 7-6, so you must have been 5-4 there. Yeah, you were 5-4. Let's see. Yeah, 1-4, 1-3, 2-3, 3-3, 4-3, 5. Okay, sorry, 5-3. Then 5-4, 6-4, 6-5. And at that point in week 11, you were 6-5, and you were up against. You had probably the toughest first 2 weeks and last 2 weeks of the season here, going up against the Yinzer Jags and the Isotopes. Fortunately, you got that win in week 12 against Yinzer Jags. Both teams had defeated you early in the season, weeks 1 and 2 there. And then you lost to the Topes again in week 13. If you had not beaten Yinzer Jags there in week 12, you would have ended up, instead of 7-6, you would have ended up 6-7. And actually, you would not have made the playoffs because you needed to win one of those games, and you did, because Hillbillies made it at 6-7. And based on overall point totals, you actually would have lost out to Dub C. We would have had 2 6-7 teams make the playoffs, but Dub C would have snuck in just ahead of you there if you had not won in week 12. But your team kind of got rolling here near the end of the season. Let's take a look here. Possum Magic. You started off pretty strong. Actually, kind of trailed off here. A little after the middle of the season, you had a 218 pointer there, but then you had some kind of trailed off a little bit, but started to surge here near the end. Said you lost to the Isotopes in week 13, but you still put up 178. Not a bad score. Then you went into the playoffs, the first week of the playoffs, and put up 196. And then obviously the 215 here in week 15. So, as for Possum Magic, said it more. I was talking about those wide receivers. So you took Derrick Henry in the first round. He didn't bust. He had a great Derrick Henry season. Your wide receivers played well most of the year. Said put together a solid lineup up and down. Weren't just relying completely on the wide receivers, which is a bit of a gamble in my opinion. So you had, at some points you had some iffy quarterback play. Said Tannehill doesn't go for 60 every week. Sometimes he goes for 30. Here, taking a look at him real quick. I mean, he's had a couple of matches in the 20s recently, in the 30s, or else he gets you 32, or else he gets you 62 here. So not much in between. But yeah, managed your team well. Came out avoided really. I don't think he really had too much injury problems there along the way. So other than guys who would have probably just been bench players, bye-week fill-ins anyway. But yeah, I don't know what else to say other than just plain old bad luck this year for Possum Magic. Once again, fought the good fight, put a good team together, and what can you say when you go out of the playoffs despite scoring 215 points, other than just not plain old fantasy football bad luck? So kudos to both of you, Yinzer Jags and Possum Magic. Put together solid teams, had good seasons, just both of you just fell a little bit short here in the playoffs, couldn't quite get it done. Mostly, you said you guys will both claim, you'll argue, I'm sure, poor lineup decisions that you will regret for a while to come here. But yeah, just between bad luck and things, mistakes, self-inflicted wounds with those lineup decisions that ended up not working out for you and costing both of you those the matchups here. Could have been the Tonto Bowl could very easily have gone the other way. Could have been a Possum Yinzer Jags matchup if both of you had made one of those last minute opposite calls on your final lineups there. So, all right. What else is there to be said about this week here? Again, Possum Magic, Yinzer Jags. Every team that made the playoffs this year, I was kind of worried about. No idea what was going to happen. Everybody is. This is one of the most up in the air. I think playoffs. Everybody who got in deserved it. I think, and had a roster that could take anybody else down. And I mean, it's always a luck factor when it comes into the playoffs here. I think a lot of us would have argued that Hillbillies on PCP was a heavy favorite. He was putting up, he said he was the highest regular season point total scorer, was putting up consistently 175, 180, like pushing 200 points every single week. So it was going to take a lot to beat him. So in week 12, I put up 192 against him, and that wasn't enough. He went over 200 points there. So, yeah. He kind of, as the Steelers went, so did Brian. I think he kind of said that from the very beginning of the season. And these last weeks of the season, these last 2 weeks, unfortunately, last week in the quarterfinal, and now this week in the semi against Disco there, said even if Brian had won, even if you had managed to win, you had a pretty good chance to do it last week. You would have gotten crushed this week in week 15 here because, as I said, you rolled with however the Steelers did, and they've had 2 back-to-back pretty poor performances here. So yeah, if you would have won last week, that would have you would have played the Isotopes this week, and Possum Magic. I mean, that would have meant that Gags was out, and Possum Magic would have been playing Yinzer Jags, and he would have defeated Yinzer Jags, and it possibly could have been another Isotopes Possum Magic Tonto Bowl, but unfortunately, it ends up being, I think Gags said, the matchup that no one wants to see. Everyone's mad about, but they're gonna hate watch it and just to see what they're gonna hate it, but they're gonna love it just to see what happens. The Isotopes versus from Gags to Riches. Isotopes looking for Tonto Bowl number 6, and Gags to Riches already looking for Tonto Bowl number 4 in his short tenure in the league here. He could overtake Detling for the second most Tonto Bowl titles here in his, I think, approximately 8 or 9 year run here in the league here. So piling up Tontos. At least he's made it, and he's lost before, so he could have even more titles than he has already. Funny thing, just to mention here real quick. I don't know if he was talking to Detling about it, but again, this year, one of the funny things about the way things turned out, is that if you look if you look at Gag's team after the post-draft, his team is trash. He should not be here. If you're looking at his team, he had, Julio, who he traded away, got him back. Kelsey, okay. T.Y. was trash pretty much all season long. He's kind of come around here these past couple weeks. A.J. Green, trash. Deshaun Watson, okay. Tariq Cohen got hurt early on, went out. Kerryon Johnson has been pretty much hurt, irrelevant. Emmanuel Sanders, really hit or miss. Higbee, you ended up dropping him. I think he's still on the waiver wire. A.J. Brown, okay, but you traded him away. Obviously Tucker. Darrell Henderson, Chargers defense, Derek Carr, Robbie Anderson, Chenault. You drafted Antonio Brown and held him pretty much right up until he was ready to come back into the league. And then you dropped him, and I think Mighty Midgets picked him up here. Sony Michel here. So yeah, if you run through what would be your starting lineup: Deshaun Watson, Julio, and AJ Brown. Okay, you got Kelsey. You pretty much have no running backs. Um, like your tight end. Who's your tight end? Okay, Kelsey. Your defense. The only defense you had, I think, was the Chargers, and you dropped them along the way. And I mean, ended up Arizona's been a pretty decent play, the way things have panned out with their matchup wise. But yeah, I mean, T.Y., A.J. Green, Tariq Cohen, Kerryon Johnson, Emmanuel Sanders, Tyler Higbee, Darrell Henderson, Robbie Anderson, Chenault, Sony Michel. Like, how you you made the magic with the trades again and got yourself into a team that's obviously taking you all the way to the Tonto Bowl. I would imagine, this is nothing, it's nothing personal, but I would imagine that Gags would actually probably agree that his team post-draft was trash. I don't like saying it, or like, because I don't want people to think like I'm picking on them individually, but I also thought that Disco's team was trash after the draft. Well, I mean, made some questionable. I think we talked about it last week whenever he went out of the playoffs here. But like drafting all those rookies early, the rookie running backs. Said Tom Brady and Burrow back to back kind of early. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You had in 6 picks there for Disco. He picked 3 quarterbacks out of 6 picks right in the middle of the draft there. Kind of confusing strategy there. Didn't really make sense to me, but I will say I'm not picking on you, because if Galladay and Chris Godwin stay healthy all season long, and if Dak stays healthy all season long, your team could have been a powerhouse. Things could have been very much different for you this year. So, I mean, Miles Sanders, Taylor ended up being Taylor and Dobbins both have good long-term potential. So when you got Waller, not saying that you draft was I don't want to say the team was trash. Not nearly like Gags' team. Gags' team after the draft was trash. Your team kind of fizzled early on. Said with those injuries and stuff, like things could definitely have been a lot different for you this year. But I can say that about several teams. Saquon, it ain't so. Darkwing Jet, those guys. Ed Lager, top 3 picks in the draft, all missed pretty much most of the season. McCaffrey, Saquon, Michael Thomas, Julio's been in and out. Where were we? I was talking about Boston Magic there, and I can't remember exactly how it played out in the draft there, but if I remember correctly, there was a lot of hype for Edwards-Helaire going into the draft, and you'll have to tell me if I'm remembering this correctly or wrong, but didn't you like try to talk down? You tried to dismiss Edwards-Helaire to Treesize because you wanted to draft him. You didn't want Possum Magic to draft him, which I think he almost did. And he ended up going and getting Derrick Henry. And you got Edwards-Helaire, even though Detling drafted between the two of you, but he took a wide receiver he wasn't going to take. Most likely, so he wasn't going to take a running back because that's not what he does anymore. He goes wide receiver heavy. So yeah, you could have had Derrick Henry, but you wanted Edwards-Helaire. How's that working out for you? How'd that work out for you this season? Never doubt Derrick Henry. It was definitely Uh, so I picked Kamara right before Derrick Henry. Um, wasn't a difficult choice at the time, I think. I would probably take Kamara before Henry every single time just for the fact that he gets catches there. But really, uh, both players fairly equal in terms of overall fantasy value. So, is there much left to be said about um, about Possum or Yinzer Jags? I don't think so. You guys can fight for the number 3 spot here. Somebody's going to get their money back, or maybe have their dues paid for next season here. So, you guys said every team had a good chance, gave it a good fight. Both said this was one of the most epic playoff weeks that the league has seen that I can remember in a long, long time. It said, if not ever. Just a great week, and we're gonna have a solid Tonto Bowl. Can't wait to see what happens. We will see. If I know it being Christmas this week, but Tonto Bowl is always around Christmas. So, and I think there's always a Tonto Bowl podcast. So I don't know if this family life, the domestication of Detling is making him less committed to his, I would argue, higher priority responsibilities, and doing it's the last podcast of the year, the Tonto Bowl. I mean, unless you do your bonus ones later after the season recap there. So, yeah, it's Christmas, but who cares? You got to talk about the Tonto Bowl. You can't not talk about the Tonto Bowl. Come on, guys. So yeah. What else is there to say? It was again a great season, and I think this season will be again remembered for what could have been. It played out the way it did every year. There's ups and downs. There's injuries. There's problems. All sorts of things that go along. Said all those early draft picks that went down for most of the season, and said including Dak there, because his loss really changed a lot of the fantasy values for the rest of the Cowboys there. This season will probably, again, it'll be remembered for what could have been, and things that everybody drafts good teams that could go, and I always have struggle coming out of the draft, besides Gags this year, but figuring out who's gonna be the top, who's gonna not be good. But everybody's team on paper always looks good, which is not an easy feat to accomplish, especially in a 12-team league. So everybody brings it every year, and that's what makes our league so good and so challenging. Makes it so much fun too. So, and to have everybody, lots of good people here, for a lot of people who have been in it for quite a long time now. A good group here that we've got. So look forward to seeing what happens here in Tonto Bowl 18, and we'll see. Looking forward to coming back again and having another great year next year. So always looking forward. It's the best time of the year, fantasy football season. So, yeah. Thanks for everyone who watched or listened here, is still with me. I guess this week I can't say good luck to everyone, because there's only one matchup that really matters, and it's the Tonto Bowl. So, Gags, you're playing me, so I'm not wishing you good luck. I will wish that none of your players get hurt, but I will hope that they meet or do not. What would be what's the opposite of exceed? They fail to meet expectations. I hope that they all come out and play poorly, and that my team comes out on top this week. So, yeah, because I want another Tonto Bowl title. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening, watching, whatever it is you do, and we will be back next week. I can't believe that ended up having this go for so long here, but we will be back to do a quick review of what happened in Tonto Bowl 18. Springfield Isotopes versus Gags to Riches. Should be an exciting matchup. We got games Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, all weekend long. It's going to take for this one to be decided here. So, looking forward to seeing what happens, win or loss, making the Tonto Bowl. Always a good time and a solid achievement here. So I need to just stop because I'm going on and on and on, and I'm watching my timer go up. And you guys don't even care. I'm sure maybe one of you, if I'm lucky, will have gotten to this point here anyway. So, all right, guys. To all of you, whether you listen or not, thanks for another great season of Tonto's Demise. Unfortunately, all the people who have left the playoff pool already, wish you could still be here. Wish we could all win. Unfortunately, only one person ends up happy. There's 12 of us. And only one person ends up happy at the end of the season here. So, thanks again to I say it all the time. I keep repeating myself, but it's such a great league to be in. You guys you bring it every year. Whether it's you all draft great. We get together. It's a good time. You're all good people, and it's just such a good group to be in. And wouldn't want it, and it means a lot to have a group like that, especially, every year we're all getting older, things change in our lives and things like that. To have, a solid group of people that you can stay, you say you got this group, the thing that glues us all together is the league here, and of course friendships always come first and foremost, but it's nice to have a good group of people here and for a long period of time. As said, we are in year 18, and hopefully we've got many years. So I'm going to say another 18, but we want more than that. Many seasons yet to go ahead of us of exciting football, and we'll see how things go. So. Yeah, and again, as we get older, life changes, people come and go, things and all the different things that go on. It's not always that you have a good, solid group of people to get together with, have a camaraderie with, year in and year out here for a couple months of the year. So. Appreciate it, gushing about it a little bit, I guess, or whatever. But yeah. Thanks, guys, and can't wait to see what happens in the Tonto Bowl, and can't wait to see what happens here. Already looking forward to having a great year again next year. So I know it's Christmas, but fantasy football season is the best time of the year. That's for sure. So, all right. That is enough for sure. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you back here next week for hopefully a very brief Tonto Bowl 18 recap. All right. Bye-bye.